Hello, this is Daniel Zolecki. Welcome to my news issue podcast. Now, today I'm going to be talking about an article that I found on The Guardian titled "The California City Where Students with Disabilities Are Segregated." Now, to briefly summarize this article, it is an article by Mario Caron, who he goes into the details of how the Sacramento City School District, nearly half of the students there with disabilities are separated from their peers, and that there is currently a lawsuit being filed that claims that the district is violating federal law. Now, the article and the author go into details about the issues of segregation of students based on disability, as well as the prevalence and overdiagnosis of students of racial minority groups, as well as their overrepresentation in the numbers of students who are suspended with out-of-school suspensions. Linking this back to the lawsuit in which all three of the students, part of that lawsuit, who are claiming that they have been wrongfully and illegally segregated, are in fact African American. Now, in this article, Mario, he goes into detail about the perspectives of the stakeholders here. For the most part, Sacramento City has gone without comment, stating that they are against all forms of discrimination and that they're looking into the matters. A typical kind of nothing of a response. However, Mario Caron really focuses in on the perspectives of the students themselves, talking about Stephen, who has been diagnosed with autism and anxiety, and talking about how he would get frustrated and behaved in ways that the teachers found disruptive, and that he was basically taken out of his classroom and sent to a non-public school where he is receiving an education that he feels is not adequate and is not comparable to the public schooling, but that his teachers said that he would be happier in. Now, they talk about Stephen's mother talking about his race and saying that he has been called the dumb black boy and that teachers were quick to see him as the problem in their classrooms. Mario continues later on in the article talking about Curtis, who is an 11th grade student named in the lawsuit as well, who daydreams about taking part in spirited classroom debates about books, but that discussions like this don't happen at the non-public school that Curtis attends there, and that he did not choose this school over the protests and objection of his guardian and of his own investment in the case. Now, this is an article that was just posted on the 19th of September, so this is a very new issue, but at the same time, it is not one that is in any ways new now, right? This is an issue that has been going on for decades upon decades and is still being fought to this day, of segregation of students with disabilities, as well as this overdiagnosis of minority students, of students of a minority race with disabilities. Now, in linking this back to our class and the materials that we've been studying in class, the most obvious parallel here is with that video Brown lecture that we watched in class on Kanita and her story of being improperly diagnosed, or at the very least being diagnosed with a disability and put into these facilities at the objection of certain family members, just like Curtis here is described as having that same experience with the Sacramento school. Second, we can also look at the Klingner articles about disproportionality in special ed that we read for last week's class, as well as the disproportionality in special education data that we looked at in class, which I went and looked at the California school districts, and the numbers that Caron was using in his article actually seem to match up in places, especially in the identification of individuals with intellectual disabilities or other health issues being far more likely for African American students in California than for any other race. Now, to kind of give my personal take on this, I'm inclined to agree with Karan and what he says at the end of the article, that by law, educators need to consider whether misbehavior is a result of a disability when deciding how to respond. He quotes a professor saying that students are not supposed to get kicked out of school for behavior they cannot control. Morally, that's wrong, and legally, that's wrong. Legally, schools are supposed to educate students with disabilities in mainstream classes whenever possible. But in Sacramento, disabilities are ostensibly cause for placing students in separate classrooms and separate schools called non-public schools, which are not equal. Now, I'm inclined to agree with the sentiment there that Karan brings, and I can only sympathize with the individuals who are presenting this case and hope for the best outcome for especially the students involved here, and ensuring that they receive the education that they legally, but especially morally, that they truly deserve. Um, and with that, I want to thank you for listening to my podcast here on the article about segregation of students with disabilities in Sacramento. Feel free to leave any comments or questions that you have in the comments below, and I'll try to answer everyone's questions or comments. And I hope we can have a very good conversation about this article here. Thanks.